We are recording. Okay. All right. Welcome in, everybody. This is a old. I guess we say friends now. Can we say friends and not like?
Yes, we can say friends now.
I shouldn't say an old student of mine, but we'll
That
say now a friend. Used to be a student of mine. This is Courtney Lucien, and one of my favorite all-time students that I worked with.
Wow.
I've said that 73 times. I'm kidding. No, you are definitely one of my favorite students.
Thank you. That's so nice.
But you are also one of those who has made a career out of theater, which I think is very cool. And want to have you on today to talk to you a little bit about that particular thing. Like, how have you done all of this professional theater stuff your whole life? But so let's just start. Just tell us a little bit about what you're doing. Tell us how you got your start in theater. And let's start there. Sorry, let's make this a little organized. All right.
Sure.
So let's talk about, all right, when did you start doing theater? Like, what was the beginning of your theater interest?
Yeah. So my memory that I have was Deb Centers, who was what did she do? She taught music history she taught high school, but then she taught music history in 6th grade. There's something for me then. And I remember back then she told me I was so hyper that I needed another outlet. Because by that point, I had sung since like 1st grade. And then I started voice lessons in 6th grade. But I believe that was why she told me to get into it. She was like, you should audition for the middle school musical. And that was what you directed, the Cinderella.
What, that's the first thing you did?
That was the first.
Yeah,
that was my first musical.
Oh, okay. Well, no wonder you've been so successful in your life.
Because of you. Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, that honestly was a formative experience for me, the Cinderella. So for the kids that don't understand what we did with Cinderella, there was such a big cast that Jay then wrote in extra parts and sort of a bookend, as in two parents and their, I think, 12 children.
Oh, wait, I think it was like 15 or 20.
Might have been more. Yeah. They were, the parents were reading the kids a bedtime story, and the bedtime story was Cinderella. So yeah. I was one of the many kids. You had me play a nerdy kid. I think I had like 10 or 12 lines. Back then was the days of counting your lines, being like, I have this many, I'm so proud. And I had a blast. I met all these wonderful people, and people that were older than I was. And those people, the people that were in 7th and 8th grade who were heading into high school and going to continue on to do theater and musical theater in high school. Those are the people that I started to look up to and admire for their confidence and their talent. So that really sparked an interest for me. Yeah, it was Cinderella. And then I did the musicals and plays through middle school and high school. Mm-hmm. And then that was when I started to reach the
So at what point, like, let's say in your high school career, you're doing theater in high school, and a lot of the people who are going to be listening to this are at that stage. Mm-hmm. And you made a decision, probably, like, I'm going to start. Did you decide, like, with college, is like, I'm just going to go to the college I want to go to, or I'm going to go look for a program where I can get more involved in theater?
Yeah, in high school, I had actually taken some private acting class or lessons, and that was what kind of got me into the side of, this is I learned about the fact that you can do it, you can major in it in college, or you can go do musical theater. Mm-hmm. And I had really loved being a part of our musical theater program in high school. And so that made me decide I wanted to do musical theater. So that was actually what I wanted to do. So it wasn't about the specific school. It was kind of looking about how far do I want to go from home, and then which schools have reputable musical theater programs. And yet I also was an academic. So I looked at schools that were, I looked at a lot of schools. So I ended up applying to 9 schools, and 5 of them were for the musical theater program specifically. And the other 4 were, I believe, just, they had good theater programs or maybe a musical theater program, but that wasn't the forefront of their strength. Yeah. So I auditioned for 5, and then I actually only got accepted into 1 musical theater program. And that, I think, was contingent on the fact that my voice was still really young. There was a lot of breathiness to it. I was actually trying to fit myself into a musical theater box when I had been taking voice lessons in operatic training. So
Yeah.
I then went into the audition with the wrong piece of music, attempting to belt when I hadn't had that be a strong suit, or,
Yeah.
I should have taken more of the soprano stuff. Or then also they had dance calls and I was not a dancer. I played soccer all of my life. So I knew that going in that I was going to be more of the classical musical theater singer, but didn't know really what I was doing with those auditions. So that was a big learning experience for me. But I did get into one program, and then one musical theater program, and that was in Texas.
Mhm.
And it was a smaller school. So it was kind of the idea of a big fish in a small pond. There's a very small musical theater program, small amount of faculty. And then the other one I narrowed it down to out of the 9. So it was the one musical theater program, and then Indiana University
Mhm.
was my second choice. So I was trying to decide between a really, really big state school, not musical theater as a major, small fish in a big giant pond, or the opposite.
Yeah.
And I ended up going with a gut feeling that happened. And really the gut feeling was based on the fact that I had visited, I think, about 4 times, because I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. And every time I went, it was never sunny, but I felt a good gut feeling about the campus itself. There were a lot of trees, it was hilly, a lot of greenery. And that was what I had weirdly enough envisioned college to look like in my mind. And so I ended up going to IU and studying theater. And my plan was to re-audition for the musical theater program, which is an option. If
Mhm.
you don't get into the program right away, you can re-audition either for the second semester of freshman year or for the first semester of sophomore year, depending on the musical theater program. And actually, I then, funnily enough, I got into these introductory acting classes and fell in love with straight theater and never looked back.
Yeah.
So I still do some musicals occasionally. I still sing incessantly and take voice lessons and all that, but it's not my true passion now, which is crazy how it led me there.
So IU is where you really said that I like theater, and if I happen to be able to sing, and do it, I'll do it. But it's theater.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you
So I
kind of
actually studied with an opera teacher in the Jacobs School of Music, which is one of the top music programs in the nation. And I was lucky enough to do that, but I just did that on the side. And it wasn't a major, it wasn't a minor. I did a little bit of like choral singing over there as well. That didn't last too long because I was so involved in the theater,
Mhm.
but I was still able to, I took some ballet classes, jazz classes, musical theater, dance classes. So I still danced and tried to keep learning that, and then sing and things like that on the side. But it was mostly like, oh, I love this thing, I'm going to do this as well. So yeah, I kept
So
busy.
let me ask, if you don't mind, what was your major? What was the declared major?
Yeah, the major was a Bachelor of Arts in Theater and Drama. And
Okay.
now IU has merged with the contemporary dance program. So I think if you get that old BA, it would now be titled a BA in Theater, Drama, and Contemporary Dance, which is
Okay.
kind of funky.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and then I
Well,
got a minor
it's
in
always,
English.
I'm sorry.
I got a minor in English as well.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that it's always a debate. And I remember when I was on tour with the Barter Theater,
Mhm.
and we went to a bunch of schools, and we go to high schools, middle schools, all that. But one of the questions kept popping up is, should I go to college for theater if
Mm.
I want to be a professional actor? And I was one who didn't. I mean, I found theater in college. I didn't do any theater in high school, but I found it in college.
Oh, okay.
But we
I didn't
started
know that.
talking about I mean, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this. The debate on, is it, you want a well-rounded education that then you can apply to your characters when you become a professional actor,
Mm-hmm.
or do you want to go in and kind of delve into the art of theater? And it sounds like with you, I always said, if I could go back, there's 2 majors I would choose if I could go back and do it. Now my major was classics. Like I said, I didn't major in theater.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, if I could go back, I would want to major, if I was going to be a theater, psychology or English, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's really about reading and learning and understanding the human condition,
Yeah.
right? I think that's where English comes in. And psychology is understanding the human mind.
Right.
So those two things. But I'm always jealous too of people who got to get immersed. Like I can't work a soundboard. Like, and everybody who
Oh.
majored in theater had to go in and do all the tech stuff and all of that. Like I
Sure.
can't turn on the lights in a theater, but I just said I need somebody to help me with all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But what's your opinion on that? I'm curious on. It sounds like you did a great thing about having a minor in English, but what would you recommend?
Yeah, I
Uh,
almost got a minor in psychology too, but they required me to take statistics, and that was a hard one for me.
yeah,
So I was one class away from receiving the psych minor as well. So I agree with you on those two as being beneficial um, to go along with theater. I'm sort of flexible in the answer to that. I do think there's definite value, and there are different programs, right? So the BA in theater, IU was a liberal arts program, so I had to take history, English, psychology. I had to take a lot of classes outside of the theater major.
hmm
But if you go to a BFA program or a conservatory type program, then you're more immersed in
yeah,
that realm. I think there's certainly benefit to that, but I would want the students to make sure that that BFA program included information, or even better, a class or multiple classes on the actual business of theater.
yes,
I
yeah.
received no information at all about what an agent is, how to get one, how to network, what your financial situation is going to look like,
Yeah.
going out into the
Well, I just
world.
say you
And
take a vow of poverty at the get go, and then you're fine. Then you have no expectations. But you don't have to
sure,
do that. But
right.
if you set your financial goals very, very low, then you don't have
Mhm.
a lot to worry.
Then you're good. Yeah, but there's also, so that's in terms of that, it's also equally beneficial for you to major in something completely not theater,
Correct.
uh,
Yeah.
like digital design, or something that you can do remotely that will earn your income so that you don't have to worry about money, and then you can take your free time, your days off, whatever, to focus on theater and do
Correct.
acting and
Yeah.
travel and audition and all that good stuff. So that's why I'm saying I'm flexible. Like you could go that route, but then you could
Yeah.
also go the other route and
I don't
spend
think
some.
there's a right or wrong. I don't, but
Yeah.
it always comes up. It's like, what do you advise? And I always say that, you want people also to go have the college experience in many
Yes.
ways. So, but I think a lot of those college, I mean, it's not like if you go and you major in theater and you get to a good theater, you're not going to have a college experience.
Hmm.
It's not, I don't know. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way
Yeah. Yeah.
of doing it, but I
And I
do,
definitely think there's benefit to getting the actual technique. Uh,
mhm,
so much. I mean, I am so grateful for all the things that I learned in the acting program specifically as well, because when you get into doing roles, whether it's Shakespeare or contemporary or musicals, anything really, there can be a lot of harm that can be done to your voice, to your body, to your mind psychologically. If you're doing some heavy drama and you're running the show for longer than a month, um,
yeah.
that can wreak some havoc on you. So I think that you also need to learn all of the skills to protect all of those elements of your instrument.
Yeah, yeah, and there's something to be said. And I just did an interview with a writer, and we talked about how, especially like if someone comes in to see, Courtney on stage, right, and they
Mhm.
see you sing or they see you act, and they say, "Oh my gosh, I can't be that good," and what we say the same thing with writing is you like read a novel and you're like, I could never write this. Well,
Mhm.
then the novelist they didn't just open, grab a pen and a sheet of paper and start writing it, and it just came out that way. And it's the same thing with an actor. There is something to be said about going and starting your process of being bad.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot, about how you have to get up on stage and do these things. So it would probably be more difficult as well if you didn't do any theater and they said, I graduated college, I'm going to be in theater, and then you start going up and just because you're going to take your
Oh
lumps.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
taking your lumps early helps.
Yes, yes.
Um,
That's why there's a big reason why I decided to be the small fish in the giant pond. There's a
yeah,
huge thing because in high school I learned a little bit about that, but I just had this little bug inside me saying you need to challenge yourself, and that has been one of the biggest pieces of advice I've given people younger than myself for many years now. Is that is a thing that is inherently within my strength system, but also that I remind, it's sort of like a mantra, it's a self mantra. How do I challenge myself? And that is a way to do it. Yeah. It's to throw yourself into something that's completely confusing and makes you feel uncomfortable. And that's how you grow is by throwing yourself into situations.
And I think it is that you have to be comfortable with being bad at first. And then learning through it, not to sit there and just be critical and say, I can't get up because I will be bad. I have to get up and go ahead and start being bad so that I can eventually become good at what I do or better. And that always, I think it's always in the back of the theater or an actor's mind is, there's a little bit of, critique always going on, self-critique, but at the same time, but you say, I want to do that because I know it'll make me better in the long run. So let's talk about a little bit about your skills. Like one of the things I remember about you most, and it's one of those huge, I think compliments, but here's what we talk about. We talk about this a lot about, all right, you were clearly like an extremely talented middle schooler when I worked with you.
Thanks.
Right. All right. So, but that's one middle school in one town, in one state, in one country. Right. So, you have to start at some point distinguishing yourself, right? Because then when you go to high school, you're still very talented. You still stand out. You're still going to play a lot of the leads, but you're going to have a little more competition. Mm-hmm. And then you went to college, and I assume that you started to meet people there that are probably as close to being as talented as you, and you may feel like you met more talented people, right? As we always do. So let's talk about a little bit. How did you try to start separating yourself? Like you're like, I'm going to compete against these people, and I've got to, in order to get noticed, I have to do what? In order to, if I want to play that lead, and there's 4 other actors up there that are just as strong as I am. What is it? I think I'm trying to get to. What is your preparation? What is your work going into this that helps you separate? When you start getting at, again, going back, and sorry not to talk about this too much, but in middle school, you were going to play leads because you were really talented, right? You were going to get those pretty quickly, and same thing with high school. Mm-hmm. But then when you get up there, like I said, with equal, what are the things that you think that you did that helped you kind of start to separate yourself a little bit from some of the people around you? Because I assume that not everybody you went to college with is still acting professionally.
No, I see all the time people dropping out.
Correct.
And that's fine. Yeah. I mean, they're comfortable with their jobs that provide benefits.
They wanted money.
Right? Yeah. They wanted stability, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Great. That's a great question. And I honestly think for me, I learned that potentially you could say the hard way or a harder way. That was when I lived in Chicago. So
hold on. So before you get too far into that.
Yeah.
You left IU, graduated.
Yes.
Moved to Chicago?
No. So right after I graduated IU, I came back to Cincinnati, and I worked for the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company as part of what they now call the intern company. It was called the touring ensemble at that point. And I did my first full year out of college from June through July of the next year.
So you came down and auditioned, like right after college, you auditioned to
my spring semester of senior year. Yeah. So I went down and auditioned, and then got the call in March of that year. So before I'd even graduated, I went, yes, okay, I have a job. And that was again another example of me chasing a challenge. So I didn't really know, hadn't done any Shakespeare in college until I took a Shakespeare class my senior year. And then I went, oh, this is something I have no idea how to do. I don't understand this. I feel like this is a new thing that has opened up all these question marks for me. So I'm going to chase that. I want to do that. It's a new passion. It's a new thing I want to learn how to be good at. So then I started looking at Shakespeare companies. So I did that with CSC for a year. And then once that year was up in about July, then in August, I moved to Chicago, lived in Chicago for 3 years. And then I moved back to Cincinnati because I had been working with Cincinnati Shakes that entire time when I lived in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And Chicago was a really big, challenging time for me. And so I decided it was best to come back to the place that was trying to have me come back and be a part of their family. And I'm happy with the work I'm doing here. I'm getting great opportunities to grow as an artist, and you don't have to be in the biggest city ever to make a career happen.
Oh yeah, no. Okay, so let's talk about Chicago for a little bit. And ironically, you and I have a little bit of a similar path.
Yeah, we do.
but I graduated college and went right to Chicago. And then, but I went up there and just made a like 2 years of just terrible mistakes.
Mm.
Even though I did theater in college, I didn't do any, I did a couple of classes, but I did shows in college, and that kind of got me excited about it. But when I went up there, I started auditioning. I didn't pick the right monologues. I didn't go into the audition the right way.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything right. And it was years, it felt like years. I got a couple of little, in the suburbs and stuff like that. I get shows there, but I had to learn how to audition. I had to learn how to present myself for, I had to learn how to be castable.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that. So you go up to Chicago, and then what did you have to go through in Chicago?
I mean, that's another thing that we didn't learn in college was, specifically like how to audition. I mean, we did auditions for the shows, but there was no feedback particularly about it unless you reached out to that director or teacher and said, please give me feedback on that audition, which I think would be wise for students. But yeah, I mean, I that success that you talk about with getting good roles, it continued through college for me. So that was the case middle school, high school, and into college. So it was a big shock for me when I went to Chicago and then suddenly was getting no hundreds and hundreds of times when I thought I was doing things right. And that was very tough for me mentally. And I knew it going in. I said, I'm going to a really big city. Again, it's a tiny fish that no one knows in a giant pond. So, go in with realistic expectations. And I had that plan. I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to live here for a few years at least and know that it's going to be tough at the beginning. But at a certain point, it's going to start to happen. The difficulty is that Chicago is a major non-equity acting town.
Yeah.
And because I had worked my first year out of college with Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, which is an equity company. And this would be another thing I would say to your students, like, go learn about what equity is, the EMC program, non-union, the differentiation between that and what that means for you as an actor, what career path you would like to go down. Would you like to be non-union for a long time? Or do you want to move towards the EMC program to become equity? So anyway, I was eligible to join equity very young. Because of that year, I had accumulated EMC points. And then I moved to Chicago, and because I was EMC, I was getting seen at those auditions quickly, but there were so many other young girls right out of college that were my age that looked like me that were non-union, so they were a lot cheaper. So all these new friends that I met that were non-union were getting all these roles. And, in my head, I'm like, well, I'm doing everything they're doing, and I feel like I'm getting my face out just as much as they are and meeting all the same people. But sometimes it comes down to the money that theater has.
No, theater very much is a business. We all think it's very artistic, and it is to a point.
To an extent.
It's a business. The doors have to stay open. If they can hire a comparable actor to you that's cheaper than you, they're going to do it.
Exactly. So. And that happened to me a lot. So the more I got into Chicago, I started to really set my ego aside and take foundational workshop classes. Or like, sort of Q&A things with casting directors to kind of say, all right, I can drop this $75, go to this workshop where I'm going to see this casting director and be able to ask them questions. And those were really helpful.
What is a foundational workshop? What did you elaborate a little bit on that? What a foundational
I just mean that could be like somebody that just moved to Chicago and they're wanting to get to know what the industry in Chicago is like. So for me, that was something that I had already been there for a few years. So it was like, why do I need to go take this workshop? But it was beneficial at that point because I was so much throwing my hands in the air going, why am I not getting cast at all? So then once I was able to ask them questions, they would look at me and go, oh no, I've seen you. I've seen you audition 8 times. I know your face and your name. And for me, that took me completely by surprise because I thought I was just completely not getting noticed. And so towards the end of that, when I started taking those workshops and reaching out to people in that way, it was great to hear from them to say, no, we recognize you need to just keep doing what you're doing. It's right. It's just the fact that you are now equity. And, we can pay equity for our understudies depending on the theater company, but a few of the big ones said that to me. And so I was able to ask questions and feel like I had been noticed. But then ironically enough, I did decide to come back to Cincinnati, and I haven't been back to Chicago all that much because I've been kept so busy here.
Yeah.
But don't at all feel like that time was a waste, but it was a really good lesson to learn at that point, to go, oh, none of that time was wasted. And it also wasn't that I wasn't getting noticed. It was just my situation, their situation. And that's kind of the name of the game in Chicago, especially if you're equity. You just have to
Yeah.
keep getting no's until you get a yes, which might take longer than somebody who's non-union.
That's right. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah.
And again, that's similar with our paths, is that I was in Chicago. I had just found this gentleman named Bern Piven. There was a Piven Theater workshop in Evanston.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a big deal up there. I didn't realize it, but he was, his son's Jeremy Piven, and he raised the Cusacks and Aidan Quinn and Lily Taylor, and that's what they all learned from him and his wife Joyce. And so I was working with him. He said, let me kind of take you under my wing, and I can help you kind of get going in this. Because what he said was, it takes about 2 to 3 years. And I learned this at the Chicago Shakespeare as well.
Okay.
Was they said, I remember taking classes there, taking workshops there, and they said the same thing. They said, you audition, and they want to know, they're not going to cast you until they know you're going to stick around enough. They want to tell you no over and over again.
Yes, Chicago's big like that.
Come back.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so not fair.
It's not.
Because you can come in and like you think you killed an audition, right? You thought you did wonderful. And they're like, well, we don't know this guy yet. Let's see him a few more times before we give him a yes. In the meantime, you're going home and you're crushed because you thought you did this audition so well and you didn't, you didn't get in. But I auditioned for the Shakespeare Festival on a fluke, Cincinnati Shakespeare Festival at the time. It was CSF at the time. And I got offered a job, and I went to Bern, and I said, look, I don't want to leave Chicago, but this, what do you think? Should I go? And he said, how many shows are you going to do? And I said, 8. I said, it's a 5-show main stage or 6-show main stage and 2 touring shows. He said, go.
Yeah.
You got to go. He said, because you're not going to do 8 shows in a year in Chicago.
That's so true. Yes.
Because if you're lucky, you'll get 1 or 2.
Yes. And the best way to learn, like you said earlier, is by doing the shows, by actually getting on stage. Yeah.
Yeah. So he is the one who convinced me to go take this job and go. And it was a huge, and this is funny, we can joke about it, but it was a huge deal. I was going to get paid $1,400 a month to be a full-time actor. And I remember telling my parents that. They're like, how are you going to eat? I said, I'll figure it out, but I get to work. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to Cincinnati, which is where I got to meet you. But he died when I was in my second year. I just finished up. I was planning on moving back to Chicago.
Oh, wow.
He passed away. And I was like, well, if Bern's not there anymore, I'm going to stay in Cincinnati and see what I can do. Yeah. So, but that's my story, but it's, but anyway, it was about sticking it out, sticking around and being used to those rejections, and how awful that feels, but that's all part of it. I think that's part of the,
and I think for your students, I would say another formative thing for me, very important, was to have a teacher at IU that I called a mentor, really, that supported me. But the favorite thing that ever happened to me with this specific teacher, he was my movement teacher, my stage combat teacher, a director of mine for 1 or 2 shows. But my favorite memory of him was he brought me into a meeting my sophomore year, and he sat me down, and by that point he'd been my director and he was my teacher, and I really looked up to him as a mentor, and my professor was like, you're a god in terms of your talent and making this happen, and felt like he really believed in me. But he sat me down and he said, I do believe in you. However, if there is literally anything else that you can do with your life, if there's anything else that you remotely enjoy, go do it.
Yeah.
And I was totally taken aback. I thought it was an attack at me at that time. And it took me a little bit to realize that that was not at all it. He was saying, no, I really do believe in you so much. But the reality of the situation, that if you continue through your college career and beyond doing the same thing, you have to know that there's nothing else that will bring you, whatever it is, that much joy, that much release, whatever it is that theater does for you. And for me, it's joy. For me, there's nothing else that I've ever found in any other side job that's lit my fire like theater has. And that remains true. And as long as that remains true for me, I will continue to do this. But because it is an industry that if you're on the stage, you're not earning as much money. If you're in film, you could be okay. But because I choose this life, it was the best piece of advice I've ever gotten. And it held true when I was very depressed in Chicago, but very confused about why I was getting countless no's. So I think that's something that all your kids need to be aware of through their life is deciding, is this really what I want to do? And also you can decide to make it a hobby, but then consciously decide to make it a side career or side hobby, or make it a priority. There's options within it. There's a sort of a spectrum, but know where you stand on it. And if you do decide to make it a career, know that you will get rejection. And so know that find ways before that happens. I would say find ways before that happens to take care of your mind. So have a therapist or a great family and friend support system.
Yeah, I think that's very important.
I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. It's great. It's funny that you say that, but I think that's the hard part of this is that, if you give up theater, and that's part of my issue. Like the last play I did was Hamlet in Cincinnati. That's the last professional role I played 16, 17, 18 years ago. I don't know how long it's been now. But that's why I could not stay away from it. I had to continue to direct or something. And I haven't, and there's definitely, now it's different when you talk about family life and raising a kid and all of that. There's those types of joys, but as far as a self joy, I haven't felt the same thing since I've left the stage. There's nothing that you do. There's nothing like being in a play once you've got to get the bug, once you get hooked on it. So I think that's great advice. And I think having that support system is very important. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about now. So you're before coronavirus, before quarantine.
Yes.
What was your day-to-day like, being with the Shakespeare Company, Cincinnati Shakespeare Company?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in my 6th season with them now. So like I said, after college, then I started with them and then been with them ever since. I got asked to be part of their resident ensemble. And Cincinnati Shakespeare is one of the few in the nation that has a resident ensemble formula. So they basically have about 30 to 40 actors that they pull from for their season. And then they'll pull people from New York or Chicago or other local people that they deem guest artists. So they can be in 1 or 2 shows in the season. But other than that, the resident ensemble gets a consistent number of shows. And we audition once a year, and then we get cast from our artistic director for the season. So it's crazy lucky because most of the theater companies just do free for all, pulling from people across the nation. Yeah, for each individual show. So that's a lot more audition time. So yeah, my day-to-day is I am an actor and I will soon be a director, which is a dream of mine. So I'm adding that to the list. It's a new challenge, scary times for them there. And then also a teaching artist. So that's usually feel like through the school year. So this semester is actually still happening. It turned online. So I'm teaching high school kids what they're called their groundlings program, Saturday mornings with them. And then summer camp, they have a summer camp that I taught the last 2 summers. And so a day-to-day for me when I'm in a show, I usually do about 3, probably average of 3 shows a season. And 1 show is 2 months in length. So
from the start of rehearsal all the way through the
so we do a month of rehearsal and then a month of performing.
So 6 months out of the year you're rehearsing and performing.
Yes, and those are my favorite. Because I decided to join Equity so young, it really was a conscious decision for me because I wanted to be able to give 100% or 150% to my acting. I didn't want to have to be working a side job when I was acting because I wanted to be able to show that director, that ensemble, that theater company that I give my all to my craft and that I'm worth getting hired again. It's really important to me because there are a lot of people that, certainly plenty of actors that have the energy level to work all day and do a rehearsal, but I don't have that. So knowing that about myself was a reason for me to join Equity. So when I'm acting here, I cut out all side jobs and I just act. So I'll wake up and I'll usually work out, do some yoga or some weightlifting, and then go to rehearsal for 5 hours, come home, work on lines. And then there are occasional times in the season where I'll be rehearsing a show in the afternoon and then performing a show at night. And those are really busy. Sometimes you then perform a show at 10 a.m. in the morning, then rehearse all day, and then do another show at night. So those are really long days, really busy. And I honestly do not know how people do other side jobs or office jobs remotely during those times. I would go insane. So it's really helpful for me during those times to just be doing acting. And then there's a lot of time spent preparing for things. So if I'm doing teaching, cutting together a script or figuring out choreography for a part of a scene, or meeting with the kids, doing monologue coaching. There's a lot of other little things that I do as well. I stay very busy.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. I want to talk about it because this is another thing that's coming up a little bit. Is one of the little lectures that I give now a lot is about taking care of yourself. About how if you're not physically taking care of yourself, and you touch on a lot of mentally taking care of yourself, you're going to struggle in this business. And one of the big lectures I used to give when we started this nonprofit, and we'd have these shows, I'd give lectures to all the finalists in the shows, and it was about food and how they would all come in with bags of fast food, and you know, and I just said, you know, you're not going to last very long. If any of you have a chance, want to succeed in this business, actually, I said succeed in anything.
Yes, true.
You know, it's about your health and wellness. So let's talk about a little bit about that.
I could talk about that for days, Jay. It's my favorite.
Well, that's what I mean. But talk just again, like, so you do yoga, you do weight training and all that, and that's. I mean, there's something for that's you as an individual, but how does that affect your craft? Let's say that. Let's talk about.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is when I was playing Hermia in Midsummer on the main stage, 2017 at Cincy Shakes. And the lovers quarrel fight scene was extremely physical. And it's only 10 minutes of the whole play. The rest of the play, I'm in a long dress, looking prim and proper and being the ingenue, right? But the lovers quarrel then is suddenly an explosion of energy, and it required a lot of very heavy vocalization accompanied by physical work. And it was all in the name of comedy. But so you could do typical stage combat work in a drama, but you could also be doing unarmed physical comedy in shows. And you have to be in top physical shape in order to have the breath support to vocalize and say lines during that scene, and not get lightheaded and make it happen. And then, you know, it's just, all the elements involved with making it as crisp and clear and healthy as possible. So I did a lot. I upped my weight training and my yoga. So there's a lot of stretching and a lot of weightlifting during that time to try and maintain the strength and the agility for that to happen. So it's kind of a thing where, and learning from the countless auditions I had in Chicago, I learned through yoga how beneficial it was for me in calming me down. So if there is anybody out there who gets really nervous for performing or going to an audition, yoga, putting that into practice as a regular thing before you do an audition is crucial, because then it becomes ingrained in your body. It's muscle memory. So you can then train your body to breathe deeply and calmly, or you can train it to, you can train yourself to calm yourself down if you get worked up. And then connecting breath with body, all of those elements work in theater. It's all connected. And I also have two autoimmune diseases, which is when I talked about not having the energy to work as a waitress all day and then rehearse at night. I knew that I couldn't do that because my energy is a lot different, and I have to conserve and then spend the energy where I can. It's not even where I choose to, it's where I can. So there are days when I really have to be very good at planning and say, I have this going on today that's going to require this amount of energy. So I need to take this other thing that's not necessary out of my schedule today and move it to a different day. So I do a lot of moving things around. And I've always needed to have flexibility in my side jobs. I aim for jobs that are remote, that I can work on my own time with, because of that being an issue for me. And so not everybody that's in theater, it is what kids might look at being like the New York go, go, go all day long. I have energy out the wazoo. Like that's not the case for actors. A lot of them are like me, where they have limitations and they work with them, but they still make the career happen because they want to.
Well, and with your autoimmune, I'm assuming that diet has to be,
it's huge.
You have to be careful on what you eat, and, you know.
Yeah. And that took a long time to learn. You know, I wasn't good about it in college. When you're in college, you know, you stay up till 3 a.m. cramming for that test or finishing that paper or whatever. I did all of that. So, but the older I've gotten, the more I've realized, no, there is benefit to the hour before bedtime, turning all the lights down and limiting screen time and doing meditation and yoga, listening to the body, eating food that makes you feel good. You just, you kind of with time become more aware of that.
And I think this all goes into part of what we talked about, is trying to separate yourself from the others, right? But those who are not taking care of themselves, you know, they're not going to last as long as those who do. Obviously, it's self-preservation, basically. But
and the biggest thing too in auditions, and I've actually sat in on a lot of auditions with Cincy Shakes, which I have asked to do because I'm interested in seeing other people and how they perform in that circumstance. And a big thing to stand out is being yourself. And also, I think it's very obvious. So you can tell the people that come in with the desperation, that desperate feeling of, I need this job. There's something that is honestly subconscious, because I, in hindsight, know that I actually sort of behaved that way. And in some of my auditions, the more I got no's, the more my desperation started to snowball. And it wasn't a conscious thing until I was able to look back on it. But that's humongous. So yes, if you are confident in your body because you work out regularly and you don't have to think about any insecurities that you have with your body, that's going to show subconsciously that you just have confidence in who you are, yourself. So that's a benefit of working out or being active or eating healthy. Then the eating well also attributes to having natural energy. It gives you the energy that you need so you can walk into that audition room with a smile on your face that's genuine, and you're not, trying to slither into that room with low energy. All of it shows, even if you're not conscious of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, and I learned this in Chicago as well, is you don't want to walk into an audition thinking that you could have done more to prepare for it. You know, you've got to go in with full confidence that I have done everything, not only on the monologue and the song or whatever you're going to be doing, but that I am at my healthiest, I am at my most calm, I am at, all of these things that I think are important. And it does show, I think, in an audition.
It absolutely does.
That taking care of yourself, I think, pays off a great deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do I kind of want to tell my favorite Courtney Lucien story in a second, but let's, if one bit of advice, let's you do one, what's one bit of advice that you could give, say that I'm to that sophomore in high school who's thinking about doing this, who is really good at it and showed some affinity for theater. What's one thing they should start thinking about at that early age, even maybe middle school, that I think I want to try this, this acting thing. What's one bit of advice that you think what's the best thing you can tell them to do?
I don't have one. I'm like, I have three.
I know. Well, tell them all. Start with priority number one.
Well, the first thing that came to mind was listen to the people that are believing in you, but also simultaneously listen to their criticism and actually take it and learn from it. I made a lot of mistakes in middle school and high school where there were people that said, I believe in you, but you need to practice more. You need to work harder.
Yeah.
If you want this, you need to go after it harder. And in time I learned that, but at that age, it was tough. I was like, but I have all these other things. I have these activities after school, and I have soccer, and I have theater, and I have voice lessons. How can I do all these things plus spend more time on them? But you can. And if it's something that you love doing, I think that having the people around you push you can be really scary and can bring you to tears when you're young. But if you look at it in a positive light and say, no, they're pushing me because they actually believe that I can be better, then I would say be kind to yourself and try and really listen to that.
So I like where you're going with it. I think if I could encapsulate that a little bit, is surround yourself with people that you can trust.
Yeah.
And that will be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So that, I think that's important, that you can get, because you don't need people to tell you you're awesome, go do this. You'll, you know,
you need the realism. Okay. Yeah. And then the other thing I would probably say is, well, two more things. So one thing is develop lots of different skills. And that is often sort of following what you're interested in. So if you like playing an instrument, or you like dancing, or, you like making videos with your friends or something, do those things, because you don't have to limit yourself. So one thing, it's all going to be connected. And then the third piece of advice would probably be, don't be afraid to ask questions of people that are in the industry, or that are people you would consider a mentor, and maybe be a little too scared to ask questions of them, So that's something that I've always offered. Anytime I go into the advice realm with younger kids, I always say, please reach out to me. And then they often don't ever.
So we'll put your cell phone at the bottom of this video, and won't say anybody.
Yeah. And I honestly say to them, you can, if you want to. I'm here. And I'm not overwhelmed by people asking advice, because I think people do get really scared. And I myself got really scared when there were people that were sending me names of people that were big in the industry. And it's taken a long time for me to actually feel like I was confident enough in myself and my abilities to reach out, even just to get coffee and ask them about themselves.
Yeah.
It still feels kind of weird.
Well, just like what I'm doing now, though, is you're taking the time right now to give advice to them. And I think people want to. I think it's, it feels good when you feel like you can help somebody. And I think that's, so don't be afraid to ask those people for advice. And, but I think that's great. As a matter of fact, it was Chicago. I was at Williamstown Theater Festival, and I loved being up there so much. And all these New York actors came up, and they performed there in the summer. So we used to get seminars from them, and we had these, a lot of tremendous actors were up there. And then one guy, I just remember this, he goes, I don't know why, he was just kind of a gritty guy. And he just said, if I were you, and I was about to graduate college, I was going to go back, and I had one semester left after Williamstown. And then I was going to go off and try to be a professional actor. And he wasn't telling me, he told us in a seminar, he goes, why go to New York? He goes, go to Chicago. And I was like, Chicago? I'd never stepped foot in Chicago. I did never step foot in Chicago until I moved there to be an actor. I literally packed up my car and drove to Chicago and said, I'm going to figure it out.
Wow.
But he said that because it was so livable.
It is.
Because you don't have to have 2 or 3 other jobs. And my friends who went to New York, when I went to visit them and they were actors, none of them were acting because they couldn't afford to. They couldn't take time off from their they were waiting tables in the afternoon and bartending at night, and they could not give up one of those shifts to be an actor because then they couldn't afford to live there. And I was like, well, then why are you here? And I was like, in Chicago, I started to have some success, and it wasn't a grind. I mean, it was a grind, excuse me. It wasn't easy, but it was not, I didn't feel like I can't not audition. I shouldn't take this audition because I'd rather work and pay rent, and if it wasn't that person, I remember that seminar when that guy said that. I'm
Oh,
like, huh, I never thought of Chicago. And then that's where I moved like 6 months later,
that's really
um,
cool.
off of that guy's advice. And it was great advice. New
Yeah.
York may have just chewed me up and spit me out. I would never have done a lot of what I did. So
Yeah. And I fly to New York. Well, I can't now, coronavirus. But
I walked to New
before,
York.
what'd you say?
You walk to New York now. Not that
Yeah,
far.
exactly.
Good exercise.
But I would used to fly to New York every 6 months. Because yeah, here in town, I have the flexibility. I can take the time off, but then I can also just, hop to New York, do an audition, and it's been prepared, and I don't live there, so there's no stress. I just head on into the city and audition and then come back home. And my brother, well, he's now back here, protected away from New York City, which is crazy. But he has an apartment in New York City, so I could stay with him, which is really nice.
That's great. Yeah.
But that was one of the benefits of being in Cincinnati, was that it's really easy to go from CVG to LaGuardia.
Yeah.
And make those auditions happen without even living in the city.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And that's another thing. I think of the advantage of, living in Cincinnati, of course, for me as well. When I was getting $1,400 a month as a full-time actor, and I think I was the PR director or something. We all had to have a day title too.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Yeah. So, but I could live in Cincinnati and have these 8 shows that first year, because Cincinnati was way more livable. I could not survive on $1,400 a month in New York. If somebody offered me, it's just, you'd have to say no. So I guess that's another thing about, you can succeed outside of New York or LA, and do just fine. Get more work and actually live and not be so stressed out. So okay. Well, let me tell my Courtney stories.
Yeah. What is this?
Okay. Well, this is these are both good. I'll tell the fun one.
Okay.
You were in a couple of original plays that I wrote, and I remember, I'll brag on you a little bit. Courtney was so talented. You were, that I remember when I started writing one of them. It was the Pygmalion play, and I had you in mind when I was writing it. So that's like, but that's the thing of a compliment. A big compliment to you was, I knew Courtney was responsible enough to handle. If I turned something over to Courtney, I knew the role was going to be taken care of, as opposed to taking a chance on somebody else. Like, I don't know this person, and I know I can count on Courtney.
And that's huge in the industry too, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. And that play, by the way, was redone in South Carolina by a friend of mine who just said, boy, I can't find anything to do. I'm looking for a play. I'm teaching this. And I said, well, I wrote a couple plays.
That's amazing.
He said, send them. And I sent, she's like, I want to do this one, Tomorrow's Myths Today. And so she took it. You were also in A Work of Genius too, I think.
Yep.
Well, yeah. So you got my early stuff, so I feel bad for you.
No, I think I still have the script somewhere, probably at my parents' house.
Yeah. So, but I went to see a rehearsal. I went down there and they were rehearsing it. They invited me in and they wanted me to watch it. And I was sitting there, and it was the young girl. I think I can't remember was it Pug? What was the name of Pygmalion? I can't remember the character you played.
It might have been.
I can't remember. Anyway, it's so funny, but it's so funny. I can't remember the name because I had you in mind when I was doing it, but it wasn't Pygmalion. But I was watching that girl and I was thinking, all right, it's so funny how I wrote this for Courtney Lucien, and I was watching someone else play it, and it just seemed so weird.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is what, 15 years later? I don't know, 20 years later. How long? I don't know how long. It's not 20 years. Well, probably 20 years. You were probably 12 or 13. No, you just turned 28. So 15 years later. So it was last year. So I see that. I'm like, I was thinking of you as I was watching this girl walk across the stage. I was like, I wrote that with someone in mind. But that's a compliment to you, and the fact that I wrote it knowing that I wanted this talented but also trustworthy actor to come do it. But I also remember this, and I'm going to joke about you and your talent. That you were in 8th grade and you were going to be the lead in everything you did, and we were doing Annie. And you came in an audition, and I remember talking to music. I said, all right, here's the problem. We've got about 4 or 5 girls who can play Annie. I said, we've only got one that could play Lily, Lily St. Regis. And I said, I want Courtney to play Annie, but if I put her at Annie, we have nobody to play Lily that will be any good whatsoever. Like nobody had the talent to play Lily. And I remember
Oh my God.
that was the hardest thing ever because I, of course, wanted you to play Annie. But there
What?
were some other people who could play it. And I remember, I would say this, I don't know if you remember this at all. I remember like it was really hard because I remember walking down the hall and I had to face you for the first time since we put the cast list up. And I'm like, she is going to be so mad at me. And I remember looking, I don't know if you remember this. You weren't happy. You were not happy with me at all. Like,
I wasn't.
And I told you, and I said, look, you were the only one who could play Lily because Lily is a big, huge character and fun and you know, and silly, and you can do all of the things that I needed for Lily. But a lot of the girls could play Annie, and it's so weird is that's one time when your talent and your skill worked against you a little bit. Like you didn't get the biggest role because you were too good for another role.
That is so kind of you.
There's no advice in that. I'm not going to tell everyone, you know.
There is advice in that, certainly.
I don't mean the advice meaning like, hey, dog it a little bit. Like, don't be too good to where. That's not the advice I'm talking about. So what is the moral? What did you learn from that moment?
Oh, well, I mean, I definitely cried when that cast list came out. I remember that. I was very upset.
Yeah, I knew you would be.
Yeah, but no, I absolutely love that you said that. I think it's that things don't work out as you expect them to always. But in that instance, that role was a challenge for me. It took me out of my comfort zone. I learned, I did an accent with it. I had to exude an element of confidence that wasn't necessarily natural for me, but again, a big challenge. And I had the most fun with those people. The Hannigan and
Rooster, right?
Yeah. Alex and Joey.
Yeah.
Played those roles. And the most fun with them. So I would not have had that experience had I not been cast in that role. So
you were great. I remember to this day, you were so good in that role, and you did not take the disappointment of not being Annie and just say, well, I'll just show up.
Oh gosh, no,
you would never do that. But I think a lot of people might like, you know. But I think it was really a lot of that role was a lot of. I mean, I remember that it was great. You were great in it, and but I remember actually like, all right, we're walking down the hall of the music room. We're about to start rehearsing, and I said, you know, you were sitting outside the room. It was like you were waiting to like, you know, kill me or anything, but you were there waiting to get into the room, and you were sitting there, and I walked up, and you just had this like, what were you thinking? Like you were like, what? I remember the look. It's like, what were you thinking? Like, why am I not Annie? And I remember having to say, look.
That makes me sound like
no. You were doing what everyone does. I mean, look, what are you, 13 at the time?
Right.
To have a professional, you know, and you weren't used to not getting like the part you wanted.
Yes.
And you didn't get the part you wanted, and you got a smaller part, but a much bigger, you know, character. Annie would have been so easy for you to play.
Right. That wouldn't have been a challenge as much. Yeah. I mean, the music would have been the singing, but I was so glad for Gloria. Yeah. It's kind of the thing where you have to take a breather, allow yourself to feel the feelings, allow yourself to feel sad and be upset about it. And then open your mind up and say, all right, well, this other person gets this role. And at that point, Gloria she was a belter. She was trained in that way. And she could really sing. And so it was like, no, I actually, you know, after I accepted that I didn't get it, and it got something, you know, it's like, oh no, I need to support Gloria because she will fit really like perfectly into this role and do a great job. And she also wants to maybe pursue this in life. And as we go into high school, like I need to support the people around me, and it's huge. Yeah.
Well, you did. It was great. I mean, it made, I think you and I had that like tense, like 5 or 10 minutes and then we got past it. And then you were a great Lily, and I didn't have to worry about it. I was like, because it got to the point where I didn't want to disappoint you either. You know, I was worried when I was like, I remember talking to Heather, who was the music, and I was like, oh man. I said, man, Courtney thinks she's going to play Annie, and she probably deserves to play Annie, but she's not playing Annie. So I remember that was awful.
Wow, thank you for sharing that story.
No, I mean, it was miserable about being a director sometimes is that,
Yeah.
one person gets the one, I mean, yeah, everyone wants to play Annie, right? So one person gets it and then everyone else who doesn't is disappointed.
Hmm.
But anyway, I just remember how good you were in that. And then everything, another thing about Courtney, I remember coming back up to Cincinnati. One of the moms invited me up to see when you played Belle in
Oh
Beauty
yeah.
and the Beast your senior year. I
Uh,
hadn't seen you all, and you were so great in that. And then I've gone up to see you a couple times in the Shakespeare Festival, and it's really great. And now, like anytime you're in a play up there, I want to make it a great excuse to come up and see you. Just
your
so.
support means a whole lot to me. I love that.
Oh well, you're like I said, you're one of my favorite students of all time, and anything I can do to support. And I also feel I feel an obligation. It's so funny because you and Matt Lytle both started working for my ex company, and
Uh-huh.
I was like, man, I'm so proud of them, but their parents may hate me for well, I thought like, all right, if it weren't for Jay, I'm not saying that you went there because of me or anything like that at all, but like, if it weren't for Jay, that's Jay's ex company. He worked with them in middle school, and that's his ex company. And I'm like, this whole thing, it's like what you talked about with that one mentor you had. It's like, are they going to be happy, that you're getting work and you're in this company, or they're going to say like, if they had not met Jay when they were in middle school,
Oh.
I'm not, again, I don't think you chose the Shakespeare Festival because I had been there, but
No, I don't even think at that point I had known that you were a part of that.
yeah, I was
Part of
there, I think
them.
year 4 or 5 or something like that. I can't remember what it
Yeah.
was.
I
Yeah.
don't think I knew that there was a connection until a few years in.
Yeah, but there was one point where you and then Matt Lytle was there, and I'm like,
Hmm.
I said, what did I said, did I, I didn't know if I did what I did and how you guys got there. I mean, it fits. I mean, you guys were wonderful, both of you. So
Yeah.
it fit, but
Yeah.
I was worried that your parents were gonna shoot me.
Oh no, no. No, they love you.
No, it's good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good enough. That's good.
You
Um,
helped us all like become who we are today.
Yeah, well, I'm happy with that because I think you've turned out to be something tremendous, talent-wise and everything else. So you were always going to succeed at something. So I think there was no doubt about that. But I'm glad you chose a life of theater
I am too.
and that you get to bring what you do to you get to make people happy. Not only you feel the joy from being on stage, but you certainly bring a lot of joy with what you do. So
Yeah,
we're all
yeah.
very lucky that you're doing theater.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so
So.
much.
All right. Well, this has been Courtney Lucien. And if you're ever in Cincinnati, go by the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company and go see her.
Yeah,
And then maybe if you need her phone number and you want to ask her something, ask me and I'll connect you with Courtney. So,
absolutely.
all
Yeah.
right,
Thank you,
Courtney.
Jay.
Thank you. I'm going to pause this and we'll say bye off the air. So,
Cool.
all right.